Psalm 91. Last time I kind of unpacked, well, as best I can, verse 1, or what we have as verse 1. You realize that when the psalmist, who, I don't know who the psalmist was here, because he's not identified in the text. And anyway, the psalmist he wrote a song, a poem. Virtually all the Psalms were written to be sung and, in fact, accompanied by stringed instruments. Well, okay, beside the point, I suppose. But what we have is verse 1. Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. And then in verse 2, he personalizes the concept in verse that is in verse 1. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust him. I think this would be the perfect prayer, daily prayer, morning prayer, evening prayer, all through the day prayer for every lover of God and follower of Jesus. Who would we declare to? Well, I need to declare it to myself. I would say primarily to myself. I need to remind myself of my belief and my experience. When I have the chance, I want to declare the nature of God to anybody who gives me permission to. And sometimes that means I have to ask permission, but most of the time it means to people who I have connected with and invested in, so to the degree that me talking about God is permitted, but I almost said is a natural thing. I don't, you may be wired differently than I am, probably. You are. I find talking about God, and I've been in the religion business for 50 years, but I find, well, not quite 50, 45 or 6 years. I often find it awkward to introduce God into a conversation. I don't find it awkward when I'm counseling people, because I've discovered in my own life and in my counseling practice that the answer to the dilemma of life, whatever the dilemma is found in one way or another in the nature of God and his purposes for us, his design for life, and our response to him. So, what I want to reflect on and focus on this morning is the idea of declaring this about the Lord to myself. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. I've talked about this a lot, but one of the primary driving needs in our lives is to find safety, security. And we'll do incredible things to get there. Sometimes we do very counterproductive things to find safety. I see this often in the couples that I work with, where they are, one or both of them are reacting to this urge to find safety by doing things to the other, their spouse, that hurt them and create less safety in the relationship instead of more. I think this happens to everybody, not just people who come to see me. I'm going to say we need safety, and we feel this need acutely sometimes. And in our world, the world you and I live in, we more often feel unsafe emotionally than physically. Now, in David's day, I'd say it's probably an even throw for David. I keep thinking of David in reference to writing this, and I don't know whether he did. I do know it was written within the time frame, within, I don't know, 40, 50 years of his lifetime. At any rate, in that day, one's physical safety was often as much at risk as the emotional safety. In our day, not so much. There are places and where the physical safety is very much at risk, and more than just often, but almost constantly. In America, I suppose there are some places like that, but I don't live there, and so I don't know that the stress and pressure of that. But boy, when we look around the world, we have Christian brothers and sisters whom we have never met, who daily face the physical threat of harm, physical harm, and even death. There's a group called Voice of the Martyrs, and they do research and then report on the persecution of Christians around the globe. You can find them online. Type into your web browser, Voice of the Martyrs. Just because we're insulated from that. We're isolated from the fact that there are Christians across the globe that they have to find their safety in God, because there is no other source of safety. But we're not them, and most of us find the threat to our safety to be on an emotional level. I feel strongly that Christians often, we don't even realize that a good bit of our reaction to the world around us is a reaction of fear, which has its root in the feeling that we have that we're not safe. Okay. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. First of all, He, God, alone. There is no other reliable safety guard. There is no other reliable refuge. No other place of safety. What are some things that a lot of times we find ourselves looking to or or treating as though these things were our refuge and our place of safety. I'm this way. The first one that comes to my mind is when my bank account is good, I feel safer. I don't think that's a sin, but what sometimes happens is instead of my security being founded on the reliability of God, I sometimes let my bank account give me the security that I ought to be permitting God to give me. And I don't know even how to express the tension, but if this is something you deal with, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes in relationships, our security comes from the feeling that the other person doesn't just like us, but approves of us. I'm an approval hound. I tell people I want to believe about myself that I don't need anybody's approval. Yes, I do. There's a lot of things that I do and say hoping that somebody else will observe me, and I'll get some form of approval from them. You realize that's not an intelligent source of long-term security, because most of the time the approval that you and I get from somebody else is really a temporary fix. Okay. Where do you look for your security? Where is your place of refuge and your place of safety? Where do you go to feel safe? See, this thing about safety and security, it's a feeling thing. There are times when mentally, intellectually, I know I am safe, but emotionally I don't feel safe. And guess which of those two things overrides the other? Normally, my emotion overrides my intellect. I think this is true for most everybody. I know people who have made it one of their life goals, and some people who have made it their primary life goal, that their intellect will always overrule their emotions. It doesn't work out well. God put us together in such a way that there will always be a tension between our intellectual self and our emotional self. That's just part of the deal. But training our emotions to respond to what we intellectually know, well, that's a lifelong journey. I think the principle here is I declare this about the Lord, and one of the reasons I declare it to myself is because my feelings need to be informed by my intellect. My intellect says, God is my refuge. A refuge is a place where I can go to find safety. He is my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust him. That last part is so important. In my life, I have to almost constantly remind myself, God is my source. I trust him. And if I trust him, what would that look like? So that's my challenge today. Two pieces. One, verse 2, what we have as verse 2 would be a great morning prayer. Second challenge is How do you remind yourself that He is your God and you trust Him? What does it look like to live trusting Him? Well, okay, I'm done. Overtime. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.